Hello! Welcome to my YouTube channel. My name is Tyler and it is 2022. So I have decided I wanted to do a quick little video about what my reading goals are for this year. I don't actually have that many, but I still thought it would be a good idea to chit chat about it for a little bit. So for Goodreads, I have put my goal as 100 books this year. Usually I do something like around 75. When I first really started getting back into reading, 50 was the goal. But looking back on my Goodreads years in the past, every year except for one, I've hit 100 books. I used to set smaller goals because I wasn't counting like graphic novels and stuff, but I have just come to the point where I think that's silly. A graphic novel is a book. It doesn't matter how short or long it is. It's a book and it counts, and I read it. So I have just gotten to the point where I don't feel bad about graphic novels padding the amount of books I read in a year. So I just set it for 100 and we'll see if I hit it or not. I'm not going to be like devastated if I somehow don't hit that. It is what it is. Another thing I want to do this year is since I have started consuming more booktube content, my Goodreads TBR has like gone off the rails. I'm sure people have like much crazier TBR shelves than I do, but earlier in 2020, like halfway through 2021, I had been so good about reading stuff on my TBR that my shelf was like under 100 books. And then now I don't even know, it's like 120 at least, I think, on my TBR shelf. And then I have, I don't know, how many books do I have over here? 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 13. I have 13 books over here on my physical TBR shelf, and that doesn't even include I want to reread A Series of Unfortunate Events this year, which is 13 books, and I'm definitely rereading the Hunger Games trilogy at this moment, so that's 3 more books. So that is something I want to focus on this year, is like really reading stuff off my TBR. Like, I am still going to be mood reading. I'm still going to pick what is based on what I'm in the mood to read. But I really think I want to try and read one physical TBR book a month and at least one off my Goodreads shelf, which isn't going to be it's not going to be clearing my TBR as fast as I want it to, probably, because I'm probably going to be adding more to that shelf than I'm reading, but that's a goal that I personally have. I want to read these books that are on my TBR shelf because they're there for a reason. I'm also going to be trying to go like read the TBR shelf from like beginning to end, and just like making sure the books on there are still books I want to read, because sometimes I've learned more about a book that I've put on my TBR shelf, and then I just like, no, I'm like, oh, that's not actually something that I'm interested in. I'm hoping I can find more Indigenous and Native authors to read this year. I know they exist, but that's something I want to expand into because I have not read a lot from Indigenous authors, so I would like to read more from Indigenous authors, and not just nonfiction, although I should probably read some of that as well, because I will say that my knowledge around Indigenous rights is not where it should be. So I would like to read more. I would like to read nonfiction, but I would also just like to read fiction by Native authors. So that's a goal. Let's see what else. So another thing I want to do is I want to try and read some of the Goodreads Choice Awards winners. I had been looking through the list at the end of the year and realized I hadn't read any of the books. So I had thought about maybe doing like a series where I read like 3 of the winners in certain categories, and doing a series throughout the year. I don't really know if that's something I want to do. I don't know how important this goal is to me. So I don't know if a series like that would be interesting to you guys. Let me know in the comments. But it is something I want to like, I want to read at least some of them. I also would like maybe try and read a winner from a category I wouldn't normally read from. So like maybe I would read the young adult fantasy winner, and I know some of those are series, so maybe I would just read the first book in that series. I'm not a big fantasy reader, but I know it's incredibly popular, so maybe like young adult fantasy might be a place I could start and read something that is good or people think is good. But I also know, like, my husband owns Crying in H Mart, and that was the memoir winner, so I could read that at some point. I would like to read the Anthropocene Reviewed book at some point. I'm currently making my way through the podcast, and I like John Green, so that seems like something I will definitely read at some point. The graphic novel, I can't believe I hadn't read the graphic novel. I hadn't even heard of it until I saw it as the winner. And that's online, but I kind of struggle. Despite reading comics on my phone all the time, I struggle with web comics, like actually reading it on a website. I don't know what the deal with that is, but maybe I should just read that in webcomic form, because like an ebook version of it doesn't seem to exist. But I don't know, I would think it might be a good way to maybe expand and read some things I normally wouldn't read, but also just read good books, hopefully, fingers crossed. And there are definitely some on here that I would probably get around to reading at some point anyways, but having like a goal of maybe reading, I don't know, like half of them might be a good idea. And have it be like a good mix of like categories I would almost never reach for or read, and things that I would already want to read. And then the last thing I want to talk about isn't necessarily a reading goal. It's kind of like it's kind of a reading goal. It's a weird goal, and I don't know where else to talk about it. But I want to eventually be able to read a book in Finnish. I've been working on learning Finnish, through Duolingo and stuff like that. So I just want to focus on it a little more and try a little bit harder. Stuff on the internet says it's like the hardest language to learn, and like the vowel sounds really get me tripped up. But like reading it doesn't seem like an impossibility to me, and maybe that's like cockiness. I don't know, like it's reading it eventually seems like a possibility. So that's what I want to focus on, improving my Finnish skills with the goal of eventually being able to read a book in Finnish. And I don't know if that would be possible this year, but it's like a long-term goal. And by a book, I don't mean like what one of these books, like what's it called? Adult fiction. I don't mean like contemporary fiction in Finnish, but I mean like a chapter book, because I'm being realistic. Like the goal would be to eventually be able to read a chapter book of some sort. Theoretically, I would love to be able to read a series of unfortunate events in Finnish. That's apparently something people recommend, is reading a book you're very familiar with in the language you're learning. I tried finding a copy of the first book in Finnish, but finding books in Finnish in America is apparently like next to impossible. And I really couldn't find that book in general. like I know is translated into Finnish, but it's maybe out of print. Maybe it wasn't very popular in Finland. I could not tell you. Anyways, so that's kind of a goal I have, is eventually being able to read some sort of book for children that is like chapters, a chapter book in Finnish. And to help along with that goal, I actually bought this. It like just got delivered today. So First Finnish Reader for Beginners, bilingual for speakers of English. And it is like, it's kind of a textbook, but it's like a language learning book. So I'm like, I want to dedicate more time, and I'm like actually spending a little bit of money to work on it. So that's a goal that just kind of seems like it fits in here. It's like I want to improve my reading life, but in a different way, by, you know, expanding my horizons by learning a new language. Maybe the actual goal I have is a little unrealistic, but I don't know. The last year has been incredibly difficult, and so having any goal that like encourages not doom scrolling on Twitter, I think like encourages me to spend time doing something that is not on my phone, that does not lead to me endlessly scrolling Twitter, seems like a good thing. So anyways, those are my reading goals for the year. Let me know what your reading goals are, and I hope to see you next week. Bye all.